Thank you. Good. I'm not quite sure this works, does it? Yeah, no, you can hear me. Good. Okay, so my name's Richard Shea, and I live in Wellington in New Zealand, and I'm most of the week I'm a freelance software developer, and I work with companies in New Zealand and Australia and further afield, some of it on Django, some on other stuff, a reasonable bit of it on Python, I'm pleased to say. The motivation for my talk today is that when I first worked on Django, which is probably about 3 years ago now, I was working with a team of people. They were all very experienced. It was quite a complex project. And I sort of jumped in, and there was a lot of stuff that I could ignore because there was lots of stuff to do, and I was quite happy to black box some of it and just sort of treat it as there be dragons. And obviously as time went by, I moved on to other projects and became more aware of the stuff that I had previously been able to ignore. But it just sort of made me think that there's stuff in Django which, when you do a start project, you don't actually need to think about at all. You can get stuff up on the screen, and various bits will work for you. And I thought it's worth marking, celebrating, pointing out just certain aspects of Django that you don't really need to think about necessarily, but they're beneficial and worthy of acclaim, I suppose, to some degree. It's wonderful how Lenovo reminds me about things at the worst possible moments. Right. So, towards that end, no, not that one. That one, thank you. Towards that end, I've picked out a few things from Django that you perhaps don't necessarily need to think about a great deal, particularly if you're doing straightforward projects. And I just thought we might look at them and see how they work and see why they work and that type of thing. These are the 5, and although it wasn't actually planned this way, it works out quite nicely because the first 3, when you get on to the last 2, you begin to see the first 3 getting used in quite a sort of constructive sort of manner. So we'll just step through those and take a look at each one of them. I've built a little Rose inspired project here, and we'll take a look at it in the context of that. It's built in 1.8, Django 1.8. It's built with Python 3.4, and most of the stuff is pretty generic. There's 1 or 2 things that are specific to 1.8, and just probably might be worth saying that it was this year that I wrote my first Django project in Python 3, and I hadn't actually done a lot of Python 3 up till then, and I was quite surprised how painless the whole thing was. So if you've been holding back and you haven't actually got a good reason to hold back, then perhaps it'd be worth trying. So middleware, this is how most of us see middleware the first time we ever use Django. It's some sort of strange construct in the settings file that it's there and you think, all right, okay, just ignore it. As long as it works, you're quite happy. There's probably enough other stuff you have to think about. Middleware provides a series of hooks where the developer can intervene in the request-response cycle and plug their own code in and do quite radical things to the process of the project. I've stolen this little diagram here from the doco, so you may recognise it. But you've got 2 hooks on the way in and 3 hooks on the way out. You've got a process request for when the request first hits the server before anything happens. You've got process view for when just before the relevant view is about to be executed. And then on the way out, you've got a hook process template response, which fires after the view has been completed. and process response, which fires almost as the very last thing before the content has gone. And finally, you've got one which deals with exceptions in the view. If you want to get involved at that stage, you can do something completely different in response to an exception. Also in that diagram, we're looking at some of the provided middleware, which, again, they generally gets left in place. Some of it will allow you to disallow certain user agents, to support e-tags for caching, will allow you to provide session facilities, the famous cross-site request forgery token, all that sort of stuff comes out of there. And so we'll just have a look at how we might actually build our own middleware, because for all the fact that it looks rather arcane when you first encounter it, it's actually quite straightforward. Our facility to stop people getting into it at certain points. So perhaps for some reason or the other, we might not want anyone to be able to get access to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to redirect people. And to do that is just a question really of creating a Python module somewhere that within your project. Mine's excitingly called middleware.py. And then we have to add to that list of middleware there and just provide an import path to the class that you have within that module that's going to provide the relevant member functions. Our class is going to be called going down. And within going down, now, I wonder if people can read this at the back. Within going down, we've got a member function called process request, so it matches the name of the hook that's available to us. And what this does is it's a pretty stupid way of providing this facility because the values are hard-coded in the settings, but don't worry about that for a minute. And it basically determines if the current time is within the two times that the downtime is going to be in place for. And if it is, it returns an HTTP response redirect. So it forces the users off to that attractive-looking page we were just looking at. Now, you might want to warn the users that there's going to be a bit of downtime. So there's another place that we can place a hook, and to do that on one of those three outbound hooks, we're going to tell the user when that downtime is going to occur. And to do that, we've got a process template request, and it's the hook that fires just before the view. We can work out what the time is, and if the time is yet to be, then we start warning them that it's this many seconds to go. Okay, now, context processors, moving on. Context processors, again, you first encounter them, there's a list of them in the default project that you make with Make project. And there's a certain amount of crossover between context processors and the middleware we just saw for the template response. But they're quite handy, and this particular one we're going to do here. Oh, sorry, no, let me back up a little bit. Sorry, so you define the location of a context processor within the templates settings. This is the new 1.8 template setting, and you specify the path to your module. I've just put stomping on there. A context processor is going to take the context that you've otherwise supplied, and it's going to add an element to it, or multiple elements, however many you want. The process of doing that is executed in the order that you've defined in that settings file. So there is a danger that if you have multiple context processors, one is going to use the same key as another. So that's what I'm referring to there. The standard context processors tend to do reasonably small, tidy little things. The I18N1 will put in the current language. The debug provides certain debug information, etc. So yes, we want to provide them with a suitably flowery message. congratulations, you've been a user for so many years. And we can do that on another method within that same, we can do that using a function as we defined a moment ago. And by specifying a dictionary which returns whatever value we want with the key of welcome message, when we get to render the template, that tag will be available to us, and we can spit it out wherever we want to use it. Signals. I've got mixed feelings about signals, actually. I put signals in the proposal because I'd always looked at them and thought, yeah, they're kind of interesting. The more I looked at them, the more I thought, actually, maybe not. But we'll just have a little look at them, actually, rather than an example, just overview. So signals are good have the ability that one application can shout out to all the other applications within a project. If you want to listen to that signal, you can turn on a listener, and if you don't, you can just ignore it. So if you look upon Django as being an infrastructure of loosely coupled applications, then that's a good thing. But you've also got something that's not very good from a computer science point of view. So there's a bit of whichever way you want to go with that. I think the general feeling is that it's something to be avoided in general. They are used quite a lot internally. There's a whole bunch that essentially tell you about database changes. And then there's a pair that tell you about when requests have started and finished. And then there's a set, if you're using authorization, there's a set that get fired when people log in and log out. I didn't actually do a demo of this, but I came across a piece of code that provides PayPal authorization. And so it's intended to be installed in your project alongside the other applications in the project. And obviously it's an attractive feature of such an application that you don't have to change your applications too much to make use of it. So the interactions that one has to have with PayPal in order to make a transaction are pretty arcane. And these guys have wrapped it up inside this application. You can install it in your project, and you can then import a form into your own project which comes from Django PayPal. They then deal with all the unpleasant strangeness that goes on dealing with PayPal. And when they hear back from it, can listen to it. So that's a reasonable use, I would have thought, of such a facility. I think the danger probably lies where people start using them for everything. Authentication. So not all sites want to be available to everyone. In fact, I'd say probably most sites don't want to be available to everyone. And if that's true, then you've got to work out a subset of the population of the world who's going to be allowed in and make sure that no one else gets in. In addition to that, once they're in, you might want them to do certain things and not be able to do certain other things. So there is the question of what permissions such a user might have. The default authorization system in Django is pretty straightforward. There's a pretty rich variety of applications that have been built by other people to support other approaches. You can do two-factor authentication, you can do Yahoo, Twitter, whatever. In addition, I saw this one which caught my eye a while back. It allows you to basically get emailed a one-time password, and that plugs into the authorization system. And yeah. So to make use of authorization, we go back to our apps, and we go and include certain modules. And sorry, I can't. Right, yeah. And the contrib.auth provides a decorator which is logon required, And so if you go try to make use of that URL, you'll find that you're either looking at this screen or this screen. And that's really all you need to do to enforce that. Now, you can achieve the same thing by putting code into the function, but this is a very neat way of providing that facility. And also quite a visible way as well. When you're paging through code, you don't have to start digging into the code. You can just look, is the decorator there or not? I didn't mention that there's a place in settings which specifies where you should go if you're not logged on. And so in this case, we've set it up to go to this particular view, but you can go anywhere you like. You can do something similar with class-based views. It's not exactly the same because of the mechanics of class-based views, but you can tell it that you don't want people to get in there unless they're logged on. So having decided that people are logged on or not logged on, you then have to decide whether or not you want them to do anything. And when the authorization system in Django provides 3 default permissions for every model in the system, to, allowing you to add, delete, or update. And unless you're a super user, you have to go and get those permissions. You have to be given those permissions. Having once been given them, you can then decorate the dispatch method of a class-based view with the relevant permission. And if the user's got it, then that's fine. And if they don't, then they're back to the login. Yeah. Right, so as I mentioned, there are 3 default permissions, but actually you might want permissions for all sorts of reasons. So you can use an attribute of the meta class to specify your own permissions. And once you've done a migrate and you've actually gone in and physically actually allowed the user that permission, then once again that can be used as a way of determining whether someone should be allowed to use a view or not. Just like that. So that was the display view, and now they're allowed to see it. Oh, I mentioned groups before. Well, groups are pretty straightforward. Groups are a tidy way of putting together a whole bunch of permissions into one place, which generally is exactly what you would want to do. So here we've got a rows updater, and we've given them a whole bunch of permissions around roses. This is not part of Django, but it interests me. It's one thing to say that someone might or might not be able to add a particular type of model, or they might be able to delete it or update it. But at a row base, or in database terms, at a row-based permissions is not something that's in the system as it currently stands. There's a package, Django Guardian, which does provide that functionality. It determines that you have a permission, and it also determines what objects you can actually make use of that permission with. So I thought that was an interesting extension. I'm not sure, I've never used it, so I don't know quite what the ins and out of it might be. Now, internationalization. I like this one. I'd used localization before, but I'd never actually done, real foreign language translation stuff. I had a go for this presentation, and it's actually it's kind of cute. So the effect we're really looking for is you've got English, you've got any language text, but you've got your own language text, and you might then want to display the same text in a different language based upon some criteria associated with the user. So here the roses are in French, and here the roses are in German. And this is, one of the things that I found intriguing about it is this is surprisingly easy to do at a basic level. I've no doubt that when you get down into the deep and dirty of it, there are issues. But and I did find myself thinking just what this meant for testing as well. But yeah, it's quite a cute thing to look at. It's based around the GNU getText technology. So if you're familiar with that, it seems kind of will seem quite familiar to you. One of the nice ways about the way it's been implemented is, and this does come back to the GNU getText, is there's a very clear separation between the work of the developer and the work of the translator. You end up with a file that the translator has to deal with, and the rest of it is reasonably non-invasive for the developer. So, how do we do that? We do the translate. We decide for each user what language they should see. That in turn depends upon one of those middleware modules, locale middleware, and it in turn hunts through a series of options looking for a language preference. So if the URL has got a language code embedded in it, like that one does, then bang, it decides it wants German. If there's a session variable, that's great, it uses a session variable. If it's got a cookie, it will use the cookie. If it's got a header, that's good too. And finally, in settings, there's a language code. Sorry, I can't quite remember exactly what it's called, but anyway, there is a default language code, and it will use that. Sorry. I'm just going to speed up a little bit because I've got more slides than I knew I had. So. In this example, we'll show how to set the language explicitly. Now, in the normal world, I reckon you'd have an extension to a user generally to do this, but this is how you might go about doing it. You put up a form which provides a list of languages, and there's a Django provided view which allows you to set it. Now, having done that, you've defined strings. Sorry, you need to define the strings you want to translate. You want to define the translations, and then you need to do a little bit of magic, and boom, it works. So within templates, you've got some special tags. So this one here is trans. There's another one called block trans, and that's essentially identifying a string that's going to be translatable. Within processing, you've got where you have a string that you want to have translated, you wrap it in a function call to uGetText or uGetTextLazy. They're here, they're aliased as underbar, and once again, that will allow the translation system to pick those up as candidates for translation. You define what languages you want to have translated, and you do a Django admin make messages, and that provides you with this file here, which I've actually populated, but when you first see it, you don't actually see the foreign language there. The base language is there, and you come along and you define whatever your translations are. Having updated that message, you then do compile messages, and that makes a corresponding pair of files, and bingo, that's it. Oh yes, right, okay. I think we might have to skip over this. Yeah, okay. So, excuse me while I skip. What we might talk about just briefly is the idea of localization as opposed to translation. So that's to do with number formats, currencies, time zones, and you can. Here I've illustrated how you can have a time displayed on your screen. When you go along and change your time zone to another one, then Django automatically provides the right time without you having to do any further work. And actually, we'll stop there. Thanks. Sorry, I had to rush. I thought I was going to be way under, and yeah.
So not.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Again, questions?
Thanks for the talk, Richard. Really enjoyed it. Quick question about internationalisation. This is something that our business is sort of just ramping up towards. So we support several Southeast Asian countries, and we're looking at internationalising our web applications. Not in Django, but in Pyramid. But well, possibly Django, we might migrate.
Yes. You have to say that, don't you?
Yes, that's right. So your example of internationalisation, that's quite good at a template level, and also where you've got labels that need to be internationalised.
Yes.
The extension to that is, how do you actually store internationalised data in the database and then pull back the right language into your application? So going a level deeper, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question, and I'm afraid I haven't looked at that. Previously, I've dealt with the localization side of Django, and I haven't previously dealt with the translation side of it, which was why I was rather sort of wide-eyed about it. But that's a very good point, and it's not one actually. I was so intrigued by the possibilities. It's not actually one that I considered, but I'm guessing that if you know what rows in a table, what objects have been created under what language, then you could store the locale code within that object, and you're then free to provide a. Yeah. Oh yeah, this man knows.
In this limited circumstance, I will allow a comment from the floor.
That's right.
This question has come up on DjangoCon Europe more or less the same way. So there's an app from Anzi, another Django core developer, who it's called Django Reverse Unique or something like that, which provides, based on the recent changes to the ORM, provides you a way to define a unique on a foreign key in some way. I don't really understand the code, but it does work really well. I use it. What I want everybody to advise not to do is doing some schema changes for your different languages. So have a column on English and German and French. This does not play well.
Right. And actually, your accent reminds me of something. My presentation was sponsored by Google Translate, so God knows what those things were saying, okay? I just hope they weren't, off.
Yes, it didn't say your hovercraft is full of eels, so we're fine from there.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Do we have any other questions?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you.